Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Business Development Manager, Cloud Economics for AWS, Tom Johnston.
Thank you. Oh, hey guys, clap when we're done, okay? My name is Tom Johnston. Thank you for taking 50 minutes out of your afternoon to talk about cloud economics. And the goal is to save you money. We're going to do a quick survey before we start. So, how many folks here are comfortable at the console, the AWS console? Okay. Comfortable in terminal? You know, driving it? Okay. How many folks here would like to spend more money for the same result? Hopefully no hands up, okay? How many folks want to spend less? Okay, great. I will be here afterwards to answer questions. We're going to take questions at the end of the session. If you have a question on what's covered in that slide, go ahead and come to one of the mics and we'll take it. Let's make this interactive. It's always bad to be A, after lunch, B, in a dark room, and C, on what can be a very dry subject. So, if there's any energy you can send my way, I'm all ears about that. So, if you wear a green eye shade or work from the console, this is a great session for you. We're going to be down the weeds a little bit. We're going to talk about M3s and T2s. We're going to talk about Trusted Advisor and stuff like that. My assumption is that you are using AWS or have used it, and generally you like the performance. So I'm not going to talk about performance tuning. But maybe you're spending more than you planned. Maybe you'd like to get the same result and spend less, maybe dramatically less. Let's talk about some ways to do that. We're going to talk about what to do. And the what to do is a set of frameworks, it's a set of tools, and it's best practices from other customers like you. So everything we're going to talk about has been done empirically by at least one other customer, generally lots. And there's more to talk about. This is sort of a 101 level on tips and tricks. There's advanced topics we can talk about afterwards. The first question is, how are you controlling the provisioning of resources? So show of hands, how many people use identity access management to control who can turn an instance on? Raise them high. Okay, look around. If your hand is not up, look at the guys whose hands are up or the ladies whose hands are up. Go talk to them after the session. This is huge, right? If my colleague Mark is here, if Mark doesn't let me turn something on, I can't waste his money, right? So I'm not saying tell people not to do things. I'm saying think carefully about who you let turn things on, because the biggest way to save money on AWS is not to use stuff you don't need. The corollary of that is when you need something, make sure you're using the right thing. We'll talk about that in a second. So a best practice is to have maybe a group of owners who can turn things on for dev, a group who can turn things on for test, a group who can turn things on for prod. And if you're not one of those people, you have to explain to them why you need something. It doesn't have to be a long explanation, but they'll make sure that the right things are done. Okay, second thing is require tagging. Who here requires tagging on their instances? Okay, again, if you don't, find someone whose hand is up and talk to them about that. What tags should you require? Okay, well, a cost center makes total sense, right? Who's going to pay for this instance? Something not on the screen that makes total sense is what I call a sell-by date or a use-by date. So let's say I'm running an experiment. Maybe I'm in the healthcare space and I'm doing an experiment on a new drug or something, and after 3 months, my experiment's going to be over. That instance should be turned off in 3 months. So when that team who controls the provisioning of resources is saying, oh, you need this instance? Great. When will you be done? And they put that sell-by date in the tag. And then it's not too hard to run a little script that looks and say, hey, what instances are past their sell-by date? And either turn them off or stop them or go to the owner and say, hey, give me a good reason not to turn this off. Now, how much do you want to enforce discipline on this? This customer, you've heard of them, won't let me use their name, but they said I can talk about what they do. Every Saturday, they turn off every instance, terminate, not stop, every instance that doesn't have a tag. And their attitude is if you can't be bothered to put the tags in place, they can't be bothered to run your instance for you. That, pretty direct, pretty maybe even brutal, but you know what? They keep their bill down this way. Now, the best practice, this is the summary, this is the one to take a picture of for this section, is control who can turn instances on, control who can create a bucket, control who can start EMR or whatever, and then require tagging. Take a look at the tags that are out there today, and I encourage you, stop instances. I'm not saying go to terminate, but stop instances that don't have tags. Okay? And again, you saw the hands, the people who are requiring tags today. Go ask them what they do, how they do it, what the best practices are. You'll find that these vary by industry, and they vary by function. So there is not one size fits all on these. Okay. How much money can you save? Well, you can save 100% if you never start something you don't need, right? You can save, however long you've turned the thing off if you no longer need it anymore. So it's a great way to save money is never to spend it. I have a teenage daughter who went to the store the other day and said, "I saved you so much money, Dad." It was 40% off. I'm like, did you need it in the first place? Okay. So the next thing is, are you identifying and terminating idle resources? So maybe there's a resource that's not past its sell date, but it's idle, right? How do you find it? How do I identify them? The best way is Trusted Advisor. So who here uses Trusted Advisor? Hopefully a lot of hands go up. It's a great tool, okay? It runs over 100 checks, and it will recommend savings for you. So what you'll see when you run Trusted Advisor, well, first of all, Samsung uses it. So this is not just for, it is for everyone, no matter how large you are, is the point there. Samsung uses it to improve their cost efficiency and make sure their service platforms are the way they want them. It's a check for them. Now, what you see when you go there and look at the far left of the screen, Trusted Advisor gives you 4 categories: cost optimization, performance, security, and fault tolerance. This is about cost optimization, but let me be blunt. Folks, if you have a security problem, please fix it first, right? If you're not using multi-factor authentication, if you're letting people have root access, please fix that. After you fix that, if you have fault tolerance concerns, fix those. And then let's go over and talk about cost optimization. So you can see that for this account, Trusted Advisor identified over $1,200 a month in savings. Right? So that's almost $15,000 a year. That's a pretty good number. We've seen this number be much higher than that. What do they identify typically? They'll identify instances that are not being used, so the utilization is low. They'll identify an instance that is being used that's running on demand that possibly could be a reserved instance, which we'll talk about in a minute. They will identify idle ELBs. They'll identify other resources that you're paying us for, but you're not using. So what you do when you see this, well, maybe you'll buy a reserved instance for one. Maybe you'll turn an instance off. Maybe you'll go to the owner and say, hey, you're running at 10% utilization. How about we move you to a different size instance? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, one of the big questions, one of the big differentiators of the cloud is demand spikes. So in the past, people would do what I call staff to peak. They would provision resources to meet their peak demand. Amazon.com understands a lot about this. We have peak demand right around Thanksgiving for people shopping for Christmas, right? And if you have to run that level of resources year-round, it's very, very expensive. So what we do is we hire workers who just help us out during the holiday season. A bunch of them are retirees who are happy to have a job for 6 or 8 weeks. And then after the new year, they go back to doing whatever they want to do. With the cloud, you can do the same thing with AWS. And you design for elasticity rather than that peak load. So your system is ready to respond and handle changes in demand. Let's talk about a few ways to do this. One is to use auto-scaling. This is a service of AWS that automatically scales up and down your instances based upon your need. Another way that many of our customers have used is a queue-based service, where they will have a queue that looks at, that handles their inputs, and then based upon the length of that queue, they will, on their own, spin up new instances or turn them off when not needed. Either one works well. It's what is your situation? What approach might work best for you? The point of this is that when you don't need resources, they're not on and you're not paying for them. So let's give you two examples. There's a large aerospace firm that was doing mathematical simulations, and these workloads would arrive whenever they arrived. And they required absolute isolation. This wasn't something that they were comfortable running them in Docker or something like that. They wanted each one to have its own instance. And so what they did was they put these in a queue, and when the queue was sufficiently large, they would add new instances. And if the queue was empty, they would turn idle instances off. It didn't take a long time to develop this solution. Worked well, saved them lots of money. Other question is, what about an e-commerce company that sees spikes, right? Maybe they see spikes right around Thanksgiving. Maybe they see spikes, like they're a flash sale company, and when their offers go out, they see a spike there. Auto-scaling is a great way to do this. A customer of ours called Telepart uses auto-scaling very successfully to deal with peaks and valleys in traffic. Now, how much money can you save with auto-scaling? Let's take a look at a real-world example. So this is a customer who had 300,000 pages per hour as their baseline traffic with 130 terabytes a month of outbound traffic. At their peak, however, they would hit over 2 million. So a little math tells you that's over 6-to-1 peak to baseline, 7-to-1 peak to baseline. Now, to hit this higher level, they had to make a bunch of architectural changes. It wasn't just auto-scaling, add more instances. They had to move from local SSDs to provisioned IOPS and to hit this scale, but they did that. Auto-scaling, however, saved them 23% based upon the ability to scale up or scale down. And if you think about it, at 2 million pages per hour, 23% savings is pretty substantial when you add it up. Okay, so the best practices. Find those idle instances and turn them off. How often should you do this? I wouldn't do it any less often than once a month, maybe every 2 weeks. Some people do it once a week. That's really up to you, but at least once a month, take a look at that. The second thing is design to scale up and scale down. Don't just take the old model of staffing to peak and never turning off resources you don't need. Don't pay us for stuff you don't need. Don't use stuff you don't need. Okay. Now, the next question is, are you using the most cost-effective instance or resource? There's a lot of choices out here. Let's talk briefly about some of them. You want to match your resources to your workload. You don't want to run things you don't need. We're going to take a look in just a second with a real quick demo. But how do you know if there's a match or a mismatch? Okay? The answer here is a tool called CloudWatch, and we're going to take a quick look at it in a minute. CloudWatch lets you collect and track metrics, including CPU utilization, for example. So you can see if you're using the resources. Here's the list of what CloudWatch lets you do. 7 metrics for EC2, a 5-minute frequency, additional metrics for other services like DynamoDB or RDS. If you step up for the detailed size, you can get a minute frequency on these with aggregation by the instance type or the Amazon machine image. So you could say, for example, show me all my C3s or C4s, or show me all my M3s. You can also put custom metrics in there. Amazon does not know. We don't know what your memory usage is. You might want to know and put that in CloudWatch. That's something a lot of people do. We've got step-by-step instructions there on that URL available. So why is this so important? The short answer is different instances cost different amounts. Let's take a quick look. The C3 family, or the C4 now, is the best priced compute performance instance we have out there. And for a C3 2XL, you'll get 8 virtual CPUs and 15 gigabytes of RAM. And it's $121 a month, essentially. An M3 2XL also has 8 virtual CPUs, so the same amount of cores, but twice the memory, and it's about what we call balanced, and it's more expensive. Then the R3 family is even more money if you get, again, 8 cores, but now 61 gigabytes of memory. And it's the lowest cost per gigabyte of RAM. But if you need, let's say, 30 gigabytes of memory, you don't need as many cores, you can use the R3 extra large. So by picking the instance that best suits your workload, you can optimize the amount of money you spend. Okay, now, if you really want to save money, ask yourself, could I burst on an individual instance? In other words, am I going to put enough load on an instance that I need to redline its processor all the time? If the answer is yes, pause, ignore this section for a few minutes. If the answer is hey, maybe, let's take a look at something. Okay, the T2 medium has 4 gigs of RAM. It has a baseline performance of 40% of the CPU, but it'll burst beyond this based on CPU credits. It's less than $18 a month. There's where you can get the details, and it's ideal for a lightly used web server, dev workloads, or small databases. Now, a lot of people, you might say, hey, I don't need something that's going to burst. I want continuous performance. Well, you know what, guys? Look at this. The T2 medium is going to outperform in most cases the M3 medium. I'll show you that in a second, and it's 11% cheaper. In many cases, it's going to be just as good as the C3 large, which costs, $30 versus $1787. So I told you we're going to dive down and take a quick look at something. So let's go do that right now. Can you switch to my demo, please? Okay. So just before I came on, I started a CPU load test that goes out and finds, in this case, 20,000, the first 20,000 primes. And it's just to put load on the CPU. It's nothing else, just sysbench. And this is the T2, and you can see it finished. About 30 seconds later, I started the same on an M3 medium. And it hasn't finished yet, and I've been talking for, what, Mark, half an hour so far, 20 minutes? Yeah, so it's not done. Now, I told you about CloudWatch. Let's take a look at that real quickly. So this is CloudWatch. Can everyone see this? It's, some of the things are a little small, but I ran this last night preparing for the demo. The blue line is the CPU performance running the same test on a T2. And the orange line is on an M3. And wow, the blue got the job done. Had a cup of coffee, and then, my system went to sleep. And the orange took, what, 2.5, 3 times as long to get the job done. So let's see, blue outperformed orange, and blue's 11% cheaper. Guys, if you're not seriously looking at the T2, please do. It's a great way to save money. You can lower your bill, and in many cases, improve your performance. Now, it's not right for everyone, but something to think about. Okay, can we go back to the charts, please? Okay. Now, this is a real-life customer. I've obviously anonymized it. You can tell they're running an older instance to start with. They're on the M1 medium, not the M3. These are great candidates to switch to a T2. If they're running an M1, there's probably no reason they can't run on a T2. Okay, so take a look at your workloads. Look at CloudWatch. Can it run on a T2? If the answer is yes, move it. If not, can it move? Is it memory intensive? Switch it to the smallest R3 that has the memory you need. If it's compute intensive, switch it to a C3 or a C4, the smallest that will meet your needs. Others to consider, if you have a storage optimized workload, look at the i2 or the new D2, and also look at G2 for GPU. By using these specialized or optimized instance types, we can save you some money. Okay, now, the T2 is not just for small companies. There's some large ones using it as well. NRI is a very large customer in Japan. They have adopted the T2, and Kaplan has adopted the T2 as well. In addition to Kaplan, this is probably one of my favorite stories. I want to go back a second. I talked to a large educational institution in the state of Indiana about 5 months ago. And they, as a result of this, talking to them, the T2 is now their default instance. So if you want an AWS instance, you get a T2, unless you can persuade them you need something else. And they have plenty of other things running, don't get me wrong. But by starting with the T2, they're saving a lot of money. They're giving their internal customers great results. So Kaplan uses the T2 as well. Okay, now, what's the savings potential of these? If the T2 works for you and you can switch from the M3 medium to a T2, that's 11% right there. Because the T2 bursts to the same level as the C3, the peak of the T2 is the same level as the C3, it will work in many cases, not all, and that's a 40% savings right there. Okay? If you move from an M3 to a C3 of the same size, you can save 25%. And if you can switch from an M3 2XL to an R3 extra large, those have roughly the same amounts of memory, that's a 40% savings. So there's real money available here in EC2 by picking an instance that's appropriate to you. Okay. So monitor the instances with CloudWatch, switch to T2 as possible, use the right instance for your workload. Now, who here uses Glacier for long-term storage? Anyone? Everyone here familiar with Glacier? Okay. Okay. Real quickly, Glacier is just as durable as S3, so it's got 11 nines of durability, but it's essentially half the price. The trade-off is it takes a little longer to get your data back, but it will essentially have your storage costs. So if you have archive needs, if you need to have a lot of data available, maybe or if something happens, think of tape, what you might use tape for in the past. Glacier is a great way to do that, and that's a great way to save money as well. Okay. Next question, are you purchasing or buying the most cost-effective way? Commitment, which provides some benefits in addition to saving money, and the spot market are great ways to save money. Reserved instances can give you up to 60% savings and a capacity reservation, so you'll get your instance. I want to point out there's two benefits here. There's the dollar savings and there's the capacity reservation. What the 60% savings means for a 3-year RI or roughly a 40 for a 1-year RI is you don't have to use that instance the entire term of the reservation to save money. So let's say you're looking at a 1-year reserved instance, but you're only going to use it for 10 months. You're still better off doing that than you are using an instance on demand for 10 months. The break-even's about roughly around 8 months for a 1-year RI. It's about 1.5 years for a 3-year RI. It's a great way to save money. We value the commitment you've made to us. It helps us manage our capacity, and we pass the savings on to you. Now, how do you know which instances could benefit from a reservation? Trusted Advisor will show you. So go to that cost optimization tab in Trusted Advisor and take a look there, and we'll automatically do that calculation for you. Just one note. My job is to help you save money, which is essentially reducing our revenue. So I get paid to reduce Amazon's revenue. It's a pretty cool job. I like it. The other thing that you can do is if you buy an RI and you don't need it, you can sell it back in our reserved instance marketplace. This is also a great place to find a shorter duration RI. So say you need something for 4 months. You need an instance in US East or US West 2 where there's a fair amount of inventory, and you need a commonly used instance. You'll probably find something that meets your needs there, often at a reasonable price. So it's a great place to look for reserved instances as well as sell them. Okay. Now, who here has used Spot? Oh, not many hands. Okay. So Spot is a phenomenal way to save money. It's also a phenomenal way to get things done quickly. So it's not just saving money, it's about speed. And sometimes the business value of speed is more important than the money you can save. We'll take a look at that in a second. You can save up to 90%. Now, I can't promise that. A number I use in a modeling, if I'm putting a model together for someone, is about 25%, or 75% savings. But it's a great way to save money. Let's talk about a real-life example in the life sciences space of a customer using Spot. This is Novartis. They're working with a partner of ours called Cycle Computing. And Novartis wanted to screen 10 million compounds against a common cancer target. And they wanted to do this in less than a week. That's a pretty big task. Why did they want to do this? The head of Novartis had told his investors that he wanted to bring cancer drugs to market faster. So they had to move quickly. They spun up 10,600 AWS instances. They did 39 drug design years of testing in 11 hours. They identified 3 promising compounds, and they spent $4,232. Okay, so for less than the price of a server, they did all that. Pretty good, eh? Now, what's the savings potential of these? Again, 40% savings for a 1-year RI, 60 for a 3-year RI, and up to 90% for spot instances. I would not model 90% for spot. I would model around 75. Okay, now, the next question is, could you save more by letting AWS do more work for you? What's a great example of this? DBA, Database Administrator. They spend a fair amount of time just backing things up and operational day-to-day work. Not real exciting, just what needs to happen. AWS can do some of that work for your team, freeing them up to do more value-added things. We have a set of upper-level services that do these things that let you focus on what you do best. And so it's not really cost saving so much. It doesn't reduce the size of your bill, but it does free up resources to do more valuable things. So these other problems might include things like desktop services like workspaces. It might include a data warehouse, Redshift, a NoSQL database, or a relational database, DynamoDB, RDS, and things like that. So these I call them upper-level services, our higher-level services. They are relatively very cheap to what it would cost you to do things on your own. So it's a great way to save money there as well. Okay, now, who here monitors their spending? Like, checks it. How often do you guys check it? Monthly, weekly, daily? Anyone daily? Weekly? Monthly? Okay. So you should check it at least, I would say everyone should check it monthly. Weekly is not a bad idea, but monthly. Let's talk about the tools we have here. First of all, how much do you think you'll spend? Okay, our simple monthly calculator lets you put in what you're buying from us and tells you what the bill should be. You can then compare your bill to say, hey, I thought I would spend X, and now I'm spending a little bit more or a little bit less. Why is that? The second thing is we have detailed billing reports and cost insights. Who here uses detailed billing reports? Okay. You should sign up for them because of the Cost Explorer tools that you'll see in a second. They're free, you just have to pay for the storage. There's no charge for the DBR just to store it. Okay. What the detailed billing report gives you, and this is a link to where you would sign up. This is how you sign up. You can get very, very, very detailed levels in your bill. It's essentially, thousands of rows, and think of it in an Excel spreadsheet on that. But the other thing they let you do is use Cost Explorer. What Cost Explorer lets you do is view the distribution of your spend by service, by linked account, by daily spend. You can analyze it historically, and you can also bookmark your favorite reports. So it's a great way to say, remember, we looked at what we think we're going to spend. Now let's look at what we did spend and compare the two. And Cost Explorer is a great tool for that. Now, okay, we did CloudWatch already just a minute ago, so we won't go back and do that. So let's talk about, for a second, what some of the savings might be for the upper-level services. Kellogg's uses our Redshift database, and they estimated that they are saving $900,000 by using this instead of running their own data warehouse. That's a nice big number. That's their estimate. I like that number, $900,000. Let's see. Okay. Now, in addition to the tools that we have, there are a number of AWS partners, Cloudamize, Cloudability, Cloud Checker, Cloud Cruiser, Cloud Health, and others that have billing and cost management tools, and I'd encourage you to talk to those as well. There are also a set of open source tools, one used by Netflix called ICE, and feel free to ask these vendors what they do that's different than running your own open source tool. If you're large enough and like open source, you might enjoy that as well. Oh, I'm going backwards, excuse me. Okay, so let's talk about a real-life example of what one of our customers did, InfoSpace. So InfoSpace, first of all, chooses all the right instance types. They use CloudWatch to do this. They use reserved instances, and they say that they've reduced their aggregate bill by 28% by being smart about which ones are reserved and which ones stay on demand. They monitor and turn off any unused instances. They've actually built their own little tool they call Junkyard Dog that does that for them. They've offloaded their architecture by moving to CloudFront. They have leveraged our app services, our Elastic Load Balancer. They use Simple Notification Service and Simple Email Service. They use Trusted Advisor to identify opportunities for savings. And they've moved their data warehouse to Redshift. So this is a customer that, in addition to saving money by moving on to us in the first place, is making sure they continue to save money by being smart about the choices they make and by monitoring things. So what to remember? Control and verify. This is the part about using identity, access, and management to control who can turn things on, and then looking at the tags to make sure that those instances still need to be used. Designing for elasticity, so that when you scale up, you bring instances and resources online, and that you remember to scale down and turn them off when you don't need them. To match the resources and the workload. So if you have a memory-intensive workload, you're running on an R series. If you have a compute-intensive workload, you're running on a C series. If you have a workload that can handle a bursty CPU, you're running on the T2. Purchase for savings. Use Spot, if at all possible, and use reserved instances to save money. Use those upper-level application services, and then model and track what your spend is. Here are the tools that match everything we just talked about. So this is what you want to do, and this is the tool, this is the how you do it here, okay? CloudWatch to take a look at what's going on, Trusted Advisor to point out where you can buy smarter, detailed billing reports and Cost Explorer to match what you're spending and where you're spending it on, some of the partners we mentioned as well. Turn off those untagged resources, stop those idle instances, match them to the task, base load with RIs, and scale with Spot. Model and track your spending. Okay, that's all I have in the prepared presentation. Typically, there's questions. I love live questions, so there's microphones in either aisle if you want to take them. Anyone have a question? Sir, over here.
Hi. I had a question about reserved instances.
Yes.
First of all, I believe that you forgot to mention that if you have reserved instances you're not using, you said you could sell them on the marketplace, but they're also modifiable to some extent, right?
Correct. Yes, thank you. So you can modify a reserved instance. For example, let's say you purchase a R3 8XL, and you want to divide it into two R3 4XLs. You could do that.
So within the same instance family, I could modify?
Yes, within the same instance family.
Now, when you discussed cost allocation, when you work in linked accounts, you have the issue of floating reserved instances, which can float from account to account. How do you allocate those reserved instance costs to the right account?
Okay, the question is about RIs and the benefits of RIs moving from one area to another.
Right.
Do I have that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So let me give a philosophical point first and then a specific answer second. Our philosophical point is always to save you money. So let's say, what's your name, sir?
My name is Yoav.
Yoan? Okay. And I are working in the same company. And I buy an RI, but I don't need it. And he is running an instance that matches that RI. We're going to assign the savings from that RI to him because it doesn't seem fair to charge him more just because I'm not using the RI. There is a way that those savings can move up or down from a linked account. The important thing to remember is buy from the account that you want to get first crack at them. So if I bought it, the instances on my portion of the linked account will get first crack at that RI. If I don't use it, the benefit will flow to you.
So the benefit flows to me, but who gets the responsibility for paying for it? After all, in chargeback or showback in the end of the month?
That's a great question. We have some work to do there, to be honest. But our goal is, first of all, to save you money, and essentially your bill would come down. It would have been higher if you didn't have the RI.
Thank you.
Sure. Question here.
Yeah, Tom, you mentioned that Novartis uses your product. They screened 10 million instances for drugs, and they wound up with 3. You know, right now it takes 10 years and $1.2 billion to develop new drugs. And are other companies using it? I know that Pharmacyclics here in the Valley was using computers, and they went from nothing to 21 billion in about 3 years. So I know they did it, but how about some other companies like Celgene or some of the others?
I'd like to ask my colleague Mark to help answer this question. Mark, can you grab a microphone back there?
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if you know, but we've got a dedicated healthcare and life sciences vertical here at AWS, and we've got a significant amount of customers that are using and taking advantage of the benefits of the Elasticity, the cloud, to do drug discovery as well as genomic analysis. A very strong ecosystem to include companies based here in California like SciAps locally in the Bay Area, Illumina you might know of, Life Technologies. Yeah, so Celgene's a customer. You know, many of these customers are, you'd be surprised how much we're doing behind the scenes.
That's great because you're saving lots of lives.
Thank you, thank you. That's the objective.
Any other questions that people want to do live? In the back. Thanks, Mark.
You mentioned RI. Philosophically, 1 year is too long for RI.
Sorry, philosophically, what is?
1 year is too long for RI because unless you are dealing with a very low-end machine, the hardware changes. It evolves very rapidly. We've seen it's not necessarily that the moment a new machine comes up, you immediately latch onto it. It may be that you have your own cycle. So you are anyway going a few months after the machine has been launched, and then its life may not be long enough.
Okay. So the question is I would try and direct it. You're saying you'd like a reservation that's not a full year.
Yes.
Okay, great. A few things is often those are available on the reserved instance marketplace, not always, but often, number one. Number two, thank you for the input. We update our services all the time based upon what people are asking for. So, you know, I've heard this from other people, not only from you as well. The counter I would gently make is if you were to go into the physical world and buy a server, there are people who will sell you a server for a year, then take it back and ship the hard drive and whatnot. That tends to be more expensive than AWS in almost all cases. Very few people will rent you a server at a RI type price for substantially less than a year. But if there's a way for us to do it and meet your need, we'd be interested in doing that. So I would encourage you to look at the reserved instance marketplace to start, and it's something we'll take a look at for our roadmap.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one.
Oh, sure.
Sure. You talked a lot about saving money on compute and things like that.
Yep.
Is there any guidance or best practices you have around saving money on bandwidth costs?
Saving money on bandwidth costs. Yep. Sure. The first thing is if CloudFront makes sense for you. I don't know what your application is, sir. What sort of app are you running? What? WebFace. Are you using CloudFront today?
I'm not involved with that. I'm just curious.
Okay. Sure. So the first step is to use CloudFront, if that's at all possible, as a CDN. It's substantially cheaper than not if you have any real volume at all. The second on data transfer is, there is often a trade-off between compute and data transfer, and if, not in all cases, but if there is, that may be something you want to adjust. The third thing is, as you know, on our pricing tier, we have public discounts, and when you get above a certain level, the discount says, call me. So work with your rep. If you're truly moving, incredibly large amounts of data, we'd like to hear from you and work out something that meets your needs and lets us, essentially lock in a provisioned amount that we know is coming. Other questions? Over here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
About the spot instance, is there a way for AWS to inform the processes running on the node before you terminate?
Is there a way for AWS to let you know we're going to terminate something before we do?
Yeah, for the spot instance, you can terminate any time, right? When somebody else needs it.
Yes, that's true.
Is there a way you can
That is
inform?
something we're looking at doing. Thank you.
Is it coming soon? Or?
I can't. I wish I could tell you that. Over here. Yes, 2-minute warning, yes. Do you need
the
more than 2
warning will
minutes?
come to the running process, or where? Yeah, but where does the warning come to? Or how does the running process or the running user process on the node knows it's coming in the next 2 minutes?
You get an SNS that tells you the termination's coming.
Okay, so is this document on this somewhere?
Yeah. I'll after the show
I'll check
session,
with
I'll
you.
show you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.